We have everything that you can't buy. We have the location, we have the chemistry, we have the recipe, we have the drive, we have the passion, we have the people, we have the following, we have the relationships. We need money. Right. Right. And it's really fucking hard to find that.
Welcome to Oysterology, a podcast bringing together the community of oysters, aquaculture, and everything from spat to shuck. I'm your host, Kevin Cox. My guests today are Kris and Beth Simonds, owners and operators of Stonington Farms Shellfish in beautiful Mystic, Connecticut. I took a field trip to Mystic to meet with them in their spectacular VRBO studio apartment that they've attached to their house, which sits above their farm. And when I say above, I mean up on stilts, hovering on the edge of a crystalline New England bay over their dock, boat slip, upwellers, equipment, and grassy marsh in as pretty a place to grow oysters as one can find anywhere. It was here that I entered the world of Stonington Farms Shellfish in a very lively interview that will give you an up-close and personal look into the real world of oyster farming. Kris and Beth take us deep into their very personal stories of trauma and struggle and how they're overcoming it. Through no fault of their own, they were each broken people who somehow managed to come together and build a family that is today filled with love and laughter, but also with unending work, fears and tears, economic challenges, and interpersonal obstacles related to their oyster farming. Their world is fueled by a passion for their farming and their commitment to each other, which, as you will see, is palpable. In our free-flowing conversation, you'll learn about love, loss, and love again, the dark side of oyster co-ops, helplessly watching your oysters die, pet ducks as food, income disparity, paying it forward, and the good, the bad, and ugly truth of oyster farming with my inseparable guests, Kris and Beth Simonds. Kris and Beth, thank you so much for being my guests on Oysterology. I'm so excited to have you guys.
We're thrilled you're here and love to share the farm with people that appreciate it.
This is one of the few times I wish I had video podcasts because I want people to see this place because it's unbelievable.
It's pretty special.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You have this point on the water. What is this body of water called?
They call it Mystic Cove. This is Murphy Point that we
Point.
live on. Yeah.
It is so idyllic. It's beautiful. The birds, the ducks, of course, that I want to eat. Your ducks.
Oh, my God.
Much like when I say that.
They taste awful.
Work hard, play hard. Yeah, it's a great spot.
The dogs jumping in the water, the boats.
It's a big, crazy mess, but it's our big, crazy mess. So
Right. And that's the beauty of it. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is it's your big, crazy mess. So I want to hear your story and how you got into oyster farming even before this particular farm.
There's a million stories within the story. I've actually been in the house for 30 years here, 31 now almost, and just very, very fortunate to have spent so much time here. Kind of grew up always in the Mystic area, always out in the water. The love of the water, the environment is just what's always driven me. We've always been passionate about being out on the water, but never really found our place. Like we're always fishing and lobstering and, but being here and having the boat slip at the house and having the water right here, just never really found the ideal thing to do from here, particularly for work. Use this place to its potential until after my late wife passed away back in 2012. And luckily from that, we had a son, Jake, who was 8 at the time and now is 20. And he was the same thing, always just passionate about being out on the water, always kind of looking for that niche. I mean, he started out his first boat at 5. He had a little rowboat, and then, worked his way up and was always driving whatever boat I had and whatever else. So just spent so much time on the water that he started using all his spare time. And this was kind of a coping skill too. After losing his mom, he just spent so much time out in the water. They started doing shoreline cleanup with boatload after boatload of garbage. And that was kind of, his thing. He still continues doing that today, just a much smaller scale because we're always so busy. But,
so water boy into water man kind of thing.
Yeah.
So did you start this with Jake, with your first wife? Is that what happened?
No, actually, she had passed away. I mean, she passed away suddenly when we were on a camping trip, and 43 years old. Just a sudden, shocking thing. God. And luckily, we each had some life insurance. If we hadn't, we wouldn't be in the same spot here today. We planned for the worst, hope for the best kind of thing, and knew that, Jake being special needs to a certain extent, being on the autism spectrum, was going to need a lot of care. And so that money was kind of set aside when she passed. I didn't know what to do as far as how to help him. It took a long time to figure that out. So I invested in real estate. Bought places, fixed them up, resold, etc. And in the process of doing that, I met a guy, Tim, who ended up working for me. He approached me just telling me about this oyster farm that was for sale. Because
at the time you weren't doing oystering or anything. You were doing your...
I was a dad, a mom, a carpenter, so struggling. And as soon as he kind of told me what it was all about and what it entailed, it just lit us both up. And I ran it by Jake, and he just, glowed that he was actually going to be able to be productive doing something on the water. So again, I kind of got out of the real estate end of it, sold the property that I had across the street that was invested for kind of his future, and bought the farm with that money. And it started out rough, obviously, in terms of income, at least. The oystering was great, but, we started out, had a couple of years before COVID, and then obviously, COVID itself was tough, and worked our way through it, and are growing now. But back to the early stages, I mean, he was, I guess, 14 or so by the time 2017 rolled around, and he just, every minute we weren't oystering, he was YouTube, he was reading, he was watching, different things, learning about different methods, different oysters, different facts. And
you helped him find his calling, it sounds like.
That and using his condition to its capacity. I mean, he'll tell us how many oysters are on what site, how long they've been there, when they're going to be ready.
That's
like,
incredible.
Oh no, that's not 96,000, it's 97,200. And so he spends a lot of time in notes and paper after paper after paper. I can't even keep a sleeve of paper in the house, but that's how it kind of started. And then
sounds like that's the key to good oyster farming, is having somebody who really can keep track of everything like that.
But then, fortunate enough, 2019 to have Beth's kids were both helping us out on the farm. And she started coming along to help us with the oystering on Saturdays and come out fishing and stuff with us. And once she was involved, just kind of never left. We instantly...
Did Human Resources ever get involved in the whole thing about like the boss hitting on the help kind of thing with that?
I do lobby for more sexual harassment. There's just not enough.
Welcome, Beth.
This is Beth.
Yep.
No, I get insulted if he does not pinch my ass on his way by. It's just like what better way to work, right? Everything's funny because we've all cried enough, so let's just laugh at everything.
Right.
So I got into this because I fell in love with an oyster farmer. I grew up in Stonington. I've always been a Stonington girl. My great-grandfather was a commercial fisherman. My grandfather, my uncle, all fin fish and lobsters and scallops, and certainly never thought I would, be doing that. But Jake was actually one of my students when I worked in the public school system. And I thought, all right, this kid's pretty cool. And I remember the second day I met him, he pulled me aside and he said, I want to tell you something. And so he told me about his mom. And so we kind of connected. And then it wasn't long after that before he was asking me to be his mom. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet. Wow. It's really cute. And he was just wacky. So I thought, all right, I've got some wacky boys of my own. These kids are going to be buddies. And I hooked him up. And that was it. They just became fast friends, and they're funny because my boys are very quiet and reserved, and Jake is the total opposite. So they were like a funny match. And then I met Kris and thought, oh my God, this is the cutest man I've ever met. So I had a massive crush on him, and they would all make fun of me. He would come in for meetings and I would like have to be shot with a tranquilizer dart to get through it. Cause I just I was like off the wall when he would come in. I was in a pretty horrible situation. I survived 20 years of an abusive marriage and had really just kind of checked out. And I had gone into survival mode and decided that I just wasn't going to have feelings anymore. And, the state of Connecticut doesn't do a great job protecting women and children. The husband, father, whoever will always have 50%. And I realized, 3 restraining orders in, that it was safer to stay. And so I did. I just had sort of resigned myself to this existence. And I met Kris, and, it was all just me thinking he was adorable at first. And then I started to come to the house and the farm. And I remember the first time he asked me to go fishing, I was dropping the boys off. And he said, "You coming out with us, right?" And I didn't know what to say. It was just like so not what I was prepared for. And I went, and I thought I have to be around this person as much as possible.
I remember when you missed your
I did miss
party.
my own birthday party to hang out with Kris. My phone was blowing up, and I was in huge
Where the hell
trouble.
are you?
And I was like, I don't give a shit. You guys can cut the cake. It's fine. I'm where I need to be.
To know that and feel that so strongly.
Oh, it was. I never thought, first of all, that it was real. I thought this is bullshit. This is what happens in movies.
Right.
And then to find out not only is it real, but to have it happen to you, it's just mind blowing, and then everything changed. I spent so much time hiding and trying to not be noticed and be invisible. And then it just was, it's indescribable. I mean, it's like a religious experience. It must be like the awakening people have when they find religion. And my ex had become more and more aggressive about knowing where I was and what I was doing. And so I came to stay here in the studio because it's a private road and because he didn't want to go toe to toe with Kris. I was able to hide out here. And I left everything behind, kind of under the guise that I'd be back. I knew I was never going to go back, but it was what I had to do to land here. And I knew if I could just get here, everything would be okay.
And how long ago was that?
That was in 2019. Yep, it was the first weekend of November I moved in here. Yeah. And the farming was therapy for me. So I would, after a lot of years of thinking you can't do anything, like, oh, I can move this really heavy tote and I can do it without help. All of my confidence and strength had been stripped from me. And so I just they pick on me now because I would rather break my arm than have help. And it might look funny, and it's going to take me longer than it'll take you, but I'll do it by myself. So they tease me, but there's a reason why I do that. And it was the farming became therapeutic, and then it was all I wanted to do. I couldn't be away from Kris. So I left my job, and I started working with Kris full time. He taught me carpentry and farming, and that's it.
Kris, you're even cuter now than you were a few minutes ago, man.
Isn't it?
Just listening
taken.
to the story is awesome.
He's
Because
taken.
when she finally left work and came to work with me, it was just a whole different experience. I've never worked with somebody that we could just have fun the whole day, even when things are horrible. I mean, I just think a few of the horrible circumstances we went through on miscellaneous jobs. There's always something that's really difficult, and I wouldn't want to do that with anybody else. It's like. It's like we never have a really bad day the same day, so one of us, picks the other one right up, and most of the time everything's fine. But when we have those moments, it's the other person, one of us takes charge and pulls it back together.
That's the first time I think we've been a part of an actual team where it felt like unconditional support all the time.
Not just that, the shared interests. I mean, I just feel like the luckiest person. I mean,
me too.
Somebody that wants to come fishing with me, and that, when I wake up at 3 a.m. and can't sleep, will come down to the workshop with me and mess around with stuff, not because they want to, but just to spend time together.
I thought for sure he would find someone and that I would have to either just I thought, okay, I'm in way too deep. I knew that I was completely in love with him, and I thought I have to make a choice. Either I separate myself now, or I stay and I suffer when he finds someone better.
Never thought I was going to find anybody either. I mean, when Rachel died, I put my name on the stone. I said, okay, that's it for me. I'm here now just for Jake and help him do what he's got to do and get through. And didn't think I deserved to be happy, And then when it happened, it was just, night and day. And Jake knew it too. Once he started seeing a real difference, obviously, in overall happiness, and
it's hard to you have to tread lightly, like you want to move in and make your place here, but then you have to be respectful of who was here before you, right. And was plucked out of thin air and dropped here. And but that's like the ducks, I brought those, so like there were no ducks here before me that were domestic and perfect and beautiful, and so I feel like I added
tasty.
They do look tasty.
No. But I added them. So like that was my little contribution to the place here, and that helps me to feel at home.
Oh, you've had a lot more than that. But I mean, you didn't walk into the easiest scenario with Jake, still in school, and obviously, we talk about all the good things, but there's been, a lot of difficult ones getting, just coexisting, little battles, but in general, yeah.
I mean, I had to maintain control, because that's how we stayed off the radar. And then you had a little more freedom. Mm-hmm. So I.
So all of a sudden there were boundaries that Jake wasn't accustomed to from a person that he wasn't accustomed to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Certainly not at home. He had them when he was my student.
Right.
Because I'm a big believer in you're going to grow up to be a man, and I don't want you to go to prison. Number one, and I want you to have people that love you, and I want you to find your tribe and have, people that will be there when we're not. And you have to give and be you have to be mature and willing to compromise and be considerate if you want to have that in your life. So I do push him really hard, but it's because I want him to be happy.
I mean, wouldn't trade it for anything.
No.
Just us being able to live together, work together. It's almost just two entirely different things. But our work time is our family time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that just really, interested me right from the beginning. Because when I was single dad, trying to work and trying to take care of Jake and everything else, it was like giving up spending time together, and
probably needing to mourn yourself too, right?
Well, I didn't get the chance to for a long time.
Right.
I mean, it started out going to therapy with Jake.
No kidding.
To the same therapist for a number of years before I could even begin, just because all my energy went into what he needed, and it's tough. It's still tough. Yeah, but that's another thing that Beth's awesome about, is when I need to talk about Rachel, or when I need to look at some pictures or do my thing, there's no judgments.
It's hard,
yeah.
Because when somebody passes, they're sort of canonized, right? Like,
sure.
It's only the good. Coming from where I came from, where I was highly replaceable and often was. But that's my struggle, and that's not something Kris should have to deal with. So if he needs to crack out the photo albums, I'll go play with my ducks. I mean, it's not something I feel comfortable being a part of. That's sort of where I've drawn the line for boundaries for myself. Rachel belongs to Kris and Jake, and I don't need to own any part of her, but I respect when they need space and time. It's one thing when you're with someone because they've broken up with someone and chosen you. It's another to be a little fucked up from 20 years of torture and know that they didn't pick you so much as who they really wanted was gone. And so it's hard to not feel like a second fiddle. Really complicated.
Yeah.
But I feel like Kris lets me talk about it when I need to.
Yeah. And I think part of that is that, there's no choosing, there's no comparison. Rachel was a chapter or multiple chapters of my life, and that book is done, and
just a learning experience, I guess, for me.
And to know that you are good enough and that you are wanted and important.
It's a very strange sensation. And to let myself get comfortable in that space is difficult because you become very vulnerable when you let go.
Right.
And so when you've survived by just turning on, I mean, I could switch off my feelings like a light switch for so many years. So to let that go and allow feelings in is pretty scary. But couldn't give this up for anything. My God.
And probably wouldn't have been able to do this kind of thing without the support of Mr. Cutie over here.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, he put up with more bullshit. I tried so hard for the first year to get him to just dump me because I thought, I can't do it. I need him to do it. Right. I need him to throw me out so this can be over before I get any happier.
Well, she would try the little stunts even, just to see how I would react, right? And,
right.
Hilarious,
to see how far I
laugh.
could push.
I mean, I'm all done being unhappy.
Yeah, like I love cooking breakfast for him, and I love just doing little things.
It's a beautiful team. And, we're sitting here in your studio, which is it an Airbnb or is it?
VRBO.
Yeah. VRBO.
Stay with us, please.
Oh, and anybody who's coming anywhere near Mystic needs to come here. This place is amazing. So you're doing the same kind of work. You're working together, like you said, and you're obviously both very good at it.
We enjoy what we do, and the studio is just a good representation of the details and how everything's not cookie cutter. And that's how our life is. Our jobs are like that, and our oysters are like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Our work reflects. When we got into this, we're going to deliver like a superior product, or we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And
either all in or all out.
Yeah. There's no half-ass. Either we're going to just stick with the construction, or if we're going to grow the oyster farm, we're going to grow it in a way that we're going to have the best product and not let it get out of hand to the point that changes.
And what I observe with your oyster farm is it's this remarkably self-contained unit. I mean, your house is literally above your farm, on stilts, above the farm. But do you ever feel like you can't get out of the office because that's home?
Yep.
The studio used to be my office, and downstairs was my carpentry shop. And I wasn't able to relax until I got it out of here and moved to a different location. But I haven't felt that same kind of stress with the farm. It's a whole different thing to me.
I think for me, it's the difference between, when we're here and it's a beautiful day, I love that we can just jump on the boat and not go anywhere.
Yeah.
But then in the middle of the night, when we're worried about money or numbers or harvest or the boat, it would be nice to not be here. So there's the good and the bad, it's great to be able to just run downstairs and jump on the boat. But then it's not great to walk into the bedroom at night and see the stack of bills next to the bed. But we're fully immersed, and that's part of what makes us unique, I think.
It really is unique from the oyster farms that I've seen. The first time I came here, I drove down the private road and into your parking area. And it was amazing because it's a beautiful house in an incredibly gorgeous location. And then it's also clearly a working oyster farm with the equipment and the boats. And you have a flupsy where you're actually growing your own seed to the right size to put out.
None of that was here. Like I said, for years, we didn't know what we could do out of here. I was always searching for something that we could do out of here as a job, but never found it until the oystering. So no, none of that was there. We always had boats in the slip. We're always out in the water, but all of that equipment that you see is all stuff that we built and put together and assembled over time.
Do you have anything in the flupsy right now, or is everything out there already?
We were supposed to get our seed early this year, but we had that cold snap. So we don't have anybody in there yet except for what we brought in to show the high school kids that came out. But at least 3 million coming in this year to run through the upwellers for seed.
And the upwellers down there are large enough that you can accommodate 3 million
We cycle them through.
3 million's our actual max for running 4 to 6 millimeter seed mixed with the other methods we use. 500,000 this year we got it large enough to bypass the upwellers because we needed to kind of stagger that product to a certain degree, so everything's not ready at the same time, everything's not in the same stage. So this year will be 3.5 million seed. Last year we did 3 million, and right now we've got like 1 million winter overseed in cages out there. We've got 1.2 2 million that we planted last year as a mix between 2-inch variety, just different times. And beyond that, there's 600,000 or so of smaller stuff. So that's what we're really trying to do is stagger, because our wholesaler really wants product throughout the whole winter. So we're trying to take care of that and really build our local restaurant stuff for the summer, where we can really maximize the income from it.
And you've got about 10 acres of bottom leased out here?
Oh, right in front of the house here is, I think, 8.9 or something, but altogether,
120?
Yeah, I think it's over that.
I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not all
not all
usable.
usable.
Like
Right.
you'll get a plot, that you lease from the town that might have 2 acres of great bottom, but you're paying for 20 acres to be able to get, so the ground slowly gets expanded, and you can use cages and so on and so forth in the muddier areas if you elevate them. But in general, that's a mix of usable and unusable
Right.
grounds. But we just recently got a couple more grounds in Stonington that are almost all usable. So
Are you trying to mix kind of old school traditional oyster growing on the bottom with new cages or floating cages or anything like that?
Yeah, we really do a little bit of everything. If you just float your oysters, you're not going to get the same taste and you're not going to get the same shell structure. And if you just bottom plant and don't move them, you're not going to get the same shape and consistency. So that's part of why we manipulate the oysters so much, is that it gives us a really uniquely shaped oyster and a consistent chunk of meat in every single one.
yeah, and I think part of that too, when you talk about different methods, a lot of it is, first of all, what we learned right off the bat from when we bought the farm. The person we bought it from worked with us the first year. So we took what we learned, we took what other people were doing, we experimented with things and kind of found what worked for us. It's an expensive process. We had two occasions where we lost large amounts of oysters to crabs. And then, we had
a cold snap and they were exposed. So we had those crazy winter tides, and the cages the oysters that were inside were exposed to the air. And we couldn't get to them because we were iced in. So we actually stood here and could see them, knew that they were just like freezing out there, and there was nothing we could do.
I can't imagine the feeling you must have when you see that.
It's like there's, from seed there, we treat every single one like it's going to make it to market. So the hours that were lost, not just the money, but the hours and the effort and the muscle that went into every oyster that died.
What kind of percentage did you lose, both with the freezing and also with that crab incident?
We still got oysters from each one of those. For example, the crab ground, we had 750,000 planted there, and they wiped out probably 70% of that. But that wasn't the whole product for the year. That was, we plant multiple grounds, so that was one portion. That was a big hit, though. That put us, as an overall, I guess, around 15% for the year of what we bought that went to market, versus now we're running around 20, 21, 22%.
Which is pretty high for this area. If you never put them on the bottom and they're not exposed to any kind of predators, and most of us out here do some form of bottom planting, and so there's always the chance of blue crabs or oyster drills or whatever.
You must have a hell of a lot of blue crabs, though, if you're getting that kind of...
It's really changed with the climate change. I mean, again, I've been here for so long, we used to crab out here all the time. And they're like 7-year cycle, and there'd be times where there'd be hardly any. Well, since we started the farm, they're just increasing every year. I haven't seen any fallback. I mean, last year we dredged at least one up in every month of the year, which is...
Well, in all different life cycles, too. I mean, there's babies and there's full-grown crabs.
So one of the things in terms of your technique that I find really interesting is you're doing what looks like kind of old school dredging, which I guess is the really traditional way of doing things here. Plus you're doing bottom cages. And do you have any floating cages?
No, we experimented with that. And there's one other farm here that has all their gear floating because they found a really good spot. But when we experimented with it, within a week, somebody had cut things free. People just don't want to see it.
Buoys.
And not the buoys. We had floating cage.
Right.
And We found it about a month later. It drifted over on an island, and the rope was clearly cut.
So it was more not in my backyard rather than let's steal the oysters. And
Well, this whole area, I mean, there's not miles and miles between one shore to another, so you do see everything in between. And I can, I wouldn't want somebody coming out in front of our house and loading it up with gear either, so I can't really complain about it if I'm the same. I think there's a place for it, though, and that's just, slightly offshore, not in these little coves and bays. But
I suppose with all the boat activity here, too, that could pose a problem.
Yeah, people get curious. I think people think that our buoys are lobster pots sometimes, and so they're just going to go have a sneak peek. And, we've seen people kind of cruising around our gear.
We can see everything, and we've told. I told one group of people that were out there on one of somebody else's farms. I said, "Oh my God, you're really lucky that I found you out here oystering, because this is his grounds, and if he found you, he'd shoot you."
Yeah,
and they're putting stuff back in the water, and they're out of there. So, I think a lot of that part is public knowledge. I mean, all of the areas are closed for public oystering, other than these specific spots. Not just because of testing, but because the rest of the spots are there for farming.
And this is people's livelihood you're dealing with.
So you can't just go randomly. And that's where it is tough on the bottom. I mean, our electrician apparently used to go to where one of our grounds are and get oysters off the bottom. But nobody knows,
Right.
Right.
So it's
you think if it's there, it doesn't belong to anybody, I'm going to take it.
But that goes back to the question you had about the dredging and why dredge. It's one of the oldest ways of doing it. And I wondered that a lot at first when I was running numbers with Tim about buying the farm. He was using numbers from his friend's farm up on Wellfleet, all right? And he has claimed as much as 80% of what he bought was going to market, all in bags, never touching the bottom, all one-season oysters. So, I mean, he's making top dollar. So I'm like, why the hell are we going to take all these oysters and put them on the bottom and lose all this and everything else? It's a totally different product. I like the taste of some of the Wellfleet oysters, but, man, they're crumbly. And there's certainly a market for really small oysters. There's nothing against them at all, but this is just a completely different product.
Is it the shell's not as tough because they're just floating in bags?
When the oyster's on the bottom, it's in direct contact with its natural environment. It's soaking up the minerals and getting a harder shell from being moved around, tumbled around. Every time you're dragging that dredge, we do it a lot with an open basket where we're not picking them up. We're just kind of tumbling them out in the bottom so that they toughen up, but also the ones that have kind of gotten buried get a chance to get to the surface and grow as well. So that's where we are now, is really just a mix of everything. We know what size we can put them on the bottom as, and unfortunately with the crabs, we're pretty close to that in bags, but we put the bags themselves on the bottom for a while first before we open them and dump them out, just to kind of help them get acclimated to the bottom a little more and in direct contact with the minerals and natural environment. So
that's one of the things that I think makes your oyster so unique, is that it's a multi-style growing process, because they're on the bottom and they're in bags and they're in bags on the bottom. So you're getting an oyster that's kind of a more well-rounded oyster in terms of shape, size, flavor, all of that.
And that actually is what led us to doing a couple of different sizes, even different brands. We have kind of 3 different varieties based on size, shape, etc.
You got some fancy names for them too?
Well, I mean, our Stoningtons are kind of our primo oyster. They're the perfect rub, our shape, size, weight. We really pick through those well. Those are all the local restaurants or the high-end ones on wholesale.
And what's the average size of those shells?
They're basically 3 to 3.5. So average size 3 1/4.
But all uniform, all pretty, nothing that's banana-shaped or concave, or they're all solid oyster.
And all of those out-of-shape ones, et cetera, most of those go towards the next size, which is Murphy Points, named right after this point here, will allow those to grow, to be at least cooking size oysters.
Oh, right.
Some of the crazy shapes don't correct at all, and they just become filters on the bottom that we leave there. But, I would say most of our oysters get sold in one of the 3 categories. The Murphy Points are the larger cooking ones. And then the last brand is Mason's Islands, which is our island right out here. And those are, I call them barely legal. They're just, oh my God, here we go.
He didn't know that was a magazine until I explained it to him. He's like, "What is the big deal?" And I said, "It's a magazine."
I didn't know it was a magazine.
Well,
And then
we were
old men
actually
look at, and
all
it's
right.
like they look like they're 15.
I was going to pitch this to Legal Seafoods. These barely legal.
That sounds like
absolutely perfect, and she thought I was perverted.
HR department had to step in again.
When I to legal seafood, I think it's funny.
So barely legals, I like those. Those would be, I often compare Eastern oysters to Pacifics and other oysters out on the West Coast. Those would be like the little Olympias that are inch and a half, 2 inches.
I'd like to say a little bit smaller, but in general, state of Connecticut, 3-inch. So these are ones that are just
lighter.
barely 3-inch. They're light. They're a couple months off of being Stoningtons. So they're a little bit better of a price point for wholesale.
How long really are you growing an oyster before you take it to market?
18 to 24 months,
Okay.
kind of average. Some of them even a little less than 18, the fast growers. Some of them as much as 30 months, the slow. So,
And I guess everything slows down in the winter. They just kind of go dormant.
Here they're dormant in the winter. They say below 50 degrees. They're still pumping down to about 40, but not very efficiently. So we do lose that whole part of the season. So we don't have any real same-year oysters here. Everything that we buy for seed this year that we're getting in May, we're selling next spring, next summer, next fall.
So there's a lot of planning involved, and the staggering of the seeding and that sort of thing is critical.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something to me about Connecticut size requirements versus Rhode Island or other states.
We have a 3-inch minimum. Other states do not.
So that means you can't take it to market if it's under 3 inches.
Other states can bring their oysters here. So Connecticut vendors can buy oysters that are under 3 inches, but we cannot sell them.
So Rhode Island can sell their 2 3/4 oysters in Connecticut, as well as Rhode Island. We can't sell them either place at that size.
From a legislative standpoint, Connecticut's cutting its own nose off.
So that's one of the things we're pushing for in legislature. And actually, we have been featured in a documentary for the state of Connecticut to push Connecticut as an oyster destination, similar thinking to lobsters in Maine. And that's something that we're hoping will come of this documentary, is that you kind of get the point across.
Is that documentary out already?
May 15th.
And what's the name of it?
At Home on the Harbor. I believe it's going to go through some film festival type thing, like Mystic Film Festival. USA Today will be there. New York Times will be there. Condé Nast Traveler. So it's just hilarious.
You guys have a pretty good social media presence. Like I see you on
trying.
Insta all the time. And
I don't know a lot about it. I'm learning as I go.
your website is beautiful, though. I mean, it's
thank
really...
you. I did that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it took a long
Could you do
time.
mine?
You got like 2 months to give me?
Yeah.
It took a long time because I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Right.
So it was just all self-taught. And of course, Dana does the beautiful design work for us, our logo.
I had one other thing to throw back at you about the sizing with the state of Connecticut. Apparently that was pushed by Bloom, which is the largest company in Connecticut.
Now, who is Bloom?
The largest oyster company maybe in Connecticut, maybe the East Coast.
And what's the name of that company?
Norm Bloom and Sons.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Cops
Norm Bloom
Island.
and Sons. Oh, Cops Island. Right.
Well,
okay.
Cops Island is one of their
farms.
So they have multiple.
So they have a ton of wild oysters, and the size does not apply to wild oysters.
Only cultured oysters,
Right.
huh?
So that's why they pushed the 3-inch limit, because now they dominate anything under
Right.
3-inch for the state.
So there's a lot of politics going on here.
They actually bought part of Mystic Oysters, and eventually we'll be purchasing the remaining part, and that's been the kind of thorn in our side. I would say the only real negative thing about what we're doing is
It's absolutely the only negative.
Really?
what goes on at the co-op there.
Tell me what the co-op is. You took me there before, and I thought it was fascinating, but tell me about that.
It used to be a lobster hatchery way back in the day. The building has a lot of history. The state of Connecticut leased it to Town of Groton. Town of Groton took it over and can keep it as long as there's aquaculture going on there.
So it's a building across the water here.
Yep, in Noank. Yep,
In
right on the
Noank.
water.
Yep.
Yeah, has its own pier.
Yeah, yep. And there are 3 farms there, us, Noank Oysters, and Mystic Oysters. Yet the way it's set up is everybody thinks it's just Mystic Oysters. You know, they wrote their name on the roof. The website basically just brings you
It links you to Mystic
It links you
Oysters.
directly to the Mystic Oysters
You
when
try
you
to
go to
call
look at
the
the co-op.
co-op, it goes to Mystic Oysters.
Yeah.
Right.
It never
Yeah.
operated as a true co-op because oyster, we're not growing bananas where all the bananas are the same. They're all
Right.
different products. So
Right.
it never really worked as a co-op, but it was established that way kind of as a cookie cutter template to get use of the property.
Because it's shared facility
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you would need that space and equipment.
We use all our larger equipment down there. We have a seed shaker here, but we have our tumbler down there. We have our cooler. We have our workshop and everything
Right.
down there.
Right.
And even though they're a larger company, everybody has one member and should have that one vote. Yet the way it's run is just the president, who's from Mystic Oyster, just makes decisions entirely on his own, even though I'm vice president of it. Nothing is even shared with me.
We don't have any access to financials. We've never seen a tax return. So we put money in good faith as part of our agreement, but we have no idea where that money goes. We also were locked out. So basically, Mystic Oysters invested a lot of money in the building on their own and built this big fancy cooler, but then wanted to charge people to use it, even though it's designated shared space, and then locked us out of it.
Well, they took the common processing area and they turned it into a cooler. So they didn't take one of their spots or one of their designated areas.
Right.
And they did so without any kind of voting or any kind of discussion. It's like repaving a random parking lot and then saying you can't park there.
Right.
There's no votes. Our dock is in bad disrepair. I offered to contribute all the labor, being in the construction industry, if the co-op would just pay for the material for the wood. Instead of going to vote, he just says no.
The governor was invited to the co-op to
He
visit.
didn't know it was a co-op. He thought it was Mystic Oysters.
Yeah, everybody thinks that he owns the building, and when they locked us out of that cooler, if we hadn't just happened to have had our reefer truck on the way, we would have been out. We would have been done. So we were running the truck here as a cooler. We got permission from the state to do that, to harvest on our boat and pack on the boat, and then get everything right into the truck.
It would be pretty easy for us to walk away from there and still be able to run this business, but part of this is the future of oystering. Not just Jake, but that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, though, is for him to really be able to expand, being able to use that property is a huge part of it, but also just for future companies to get in and get started. Because as many oyster companies as there are now, there's such a demand that the demand well outweighs what's being produced. And if people just, produce a better product, then they're going to survive.
Right.
And when times get a little bit tough, market-wise, all those little ones that are half-assed are the ones that are going to disappear, and the ones that are working hard selling the best quality product will be the survivors of it.
And a shared space to me makes so much sense because there is a barrier to entry.
Right.
It's not just about buying your gear and your seed
Right,
and throwing it out in the water. You have to process it. You have to store it, all of that sort of stuff.
But how cool would it be to be down there with like a grill going and talk to each other?
It's a great mechanism for field trips, for events, for learning, getting people involved. I mean, that was part of what it was intended for, and since has just become monopoly.
There's other farms that want in that have been denied. We didn't know they'd even tried.
When I called things out and tried to have an actual meeting, I don't know if I was at 4 or 5 times that I've called out meetings that we've just been denied. Just either don't get a response or I get no. So we're working hard on a revamp, trying to make it, instead of a co-op, maybe a oyster group or something that's a little more in tune, where we all just rent space and you're responsible for your own space. Therefore, nobody is in charge of the property other than maybe a manager. Before somebody gets hurt on this dock, for example, or even simple things, what maintenance needs to be done, what we do about signage. We were told that we weren't allowed to have any events down there, but then they're doing like campaign events and shucking events and everything else. So It's a sore spot right now, but I want to just keep pushing on for the future of it.
One of the things that I think is so interesting about what you guys do too, you're doing a lot of kind of paying it forward to other groups and kids. Is it like the outreach arm?
Yeah, well, I think when you've been through what Kris and I have been through and you come out the other side, you have this feeling of gratitude and you're obligated to spread that, like concentric circles of good that just like forever continue. And I've always been a big believer in that you never take more help than you give. Mm-hmm. And if everybody just helped more and tried to think about other people a little bit more frequently and just showed appreciation for other people and what they go through, we'd be in a far different world. Yeah. And like what better platform than this? I mean, there's so many kids in this area that have never put their feet in the salt water. The income disparity in this area is staggering. You know, you've got kids at school that got a brand new 30-foot boat for their 16th birthday sitting next to kids that only eat at school because they don't have food at home. And your only exposure to the water shouldn't be during your sailing lessons at the yacht club. So there's got to be a way to get more kids involved, and we've got to bring on more environmental stewards. And the only way you're going to get kids to care is to get them to fall in love with the water, and they've got to get to it first. Yep. So
things have a way of working their way around. It's like the more good you do for others, that does work its way back. You know,
you got to put it out there.
And we both had such a string of bad luck that sometimes it's really hard. Mm-hmm. But it's like, you know, just keep pushing, keep doing the right thing, keep doing it.
Monday this week, I silently wept all day because it can be so discouraging. Because you think, what more do I have to do, and how much harder do I have to work for things to turn around and for things to not be easy, but like tolerable.
Well, the long history of the house here and the family situation, and hopefully Jake's mom passed down her part of the house to Jake. Hopefully I'm able to do the same, but it's a difficult task with no retirement. So again, we try to do as many things for as many other people as possible as well, just because we feel really fortunate for the situation we are in. But there are times, especially doing 2 full-time jobs, that just...
It's tiring.
Yeah.
There are times that we're doing jobs that are physically demanding, but leaving a lot of headspace. Anything where we're not doing any sort of intricate woodworking, your mind just goes and goes and goes. And if you don't reel it in, you're in big trouble, because when you stop and really absorb the whole picture, it can be really scary. It's really overwhelming. So many things have to continue going right for us to survive, and so many things need to change for the better for us to really grow. It's such a gamble, you know, but how do you not take it? With everything that's gone in, you can't go back now. You just have to hope. So it's scary, the lack of control. And
yet you're still thinking of others, and you're still paying it forward. You did something with, I think, was it the Mavens group?
Yeah, we love that. That's getting young ladies out on the water. And the great thing about Mavens is they are a part of the New England Science and Sailing group, and they're exploring jobs in aquaculture. So they actually get their boating license. They learn first aid. So it's a lot of empowerment for these girls, and they're fantastic.
Kind of life skills.
Oh, yeah, we had a ball with them. I mean, they're just so funny. And then the high school kids that come out and actually eat oysters and then vomit all over the pad is fantastic. And we do a lot of charity stuff, and we donate raw bars to charity. So as a silent auction gift, we'll donate a 20-person raw bar with T-shirts and knives, and it's just fun.
Now, do you guys eat oysters a lot? I'd be eating them all the time.
Not really. I mean, you snack on them.
Yeah. But like when you're out on the boat, you shuck one or two.
Yeah.
You got to sample.
I like getting a fresh one right out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because who gets to do that? I mean, it's such a treat.
Yeah. Seriously. I mean, that's right.
Yeah. Quality control.
It's fun snorkeling for them, too. Just when the ground's almost empty, we'll snorkel, get the last ones, just because it's fun.
Yeah.
But seeing them partially open,
you know,
and seeing the actual muscle inside, you know, that's
then they
really,
snap
really
shut.
Cool. Yeah.
But you don't do like oyster stuffing in the turkey or
No, I'll stuff oysters. I love stuffed oysters. If we
really?
get some really funky ones or some real big ones, I do it like you would do with a clam. Just chorizo, chop them up with chorizo, butter, breadcrumbs, lemon, parsley, and bake them. And they stay soft and sweet, where clams can get a little bit rubbery.
Yeah.
The oysters stay really supple, and they've got a more mild flavor. They're so good.
Do you still get the flavor of the oyster with the
do.
chorizo and everything in there?
Yeah. I mean, it's an oyster, but it's not.
Right.
I can get anybody to eat them that way.
Now, with your ducks out here, you have 19, did you say?
Yep.
19 ducks. Oh, I'm sorry. I counted this morning when you weren't looking. I only got 18. But don't check
Bullshit,
my truck.
because I can feel it that they're all out there. In the
No.
Yeah, I can tell.
That was funny when we went to the ball game and we were walking through Chinatown in New York.
Oh my God.
And they're all hanging in the window.
Yeah, we went to a Mets
Oh
game.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
Chinese restaurants. Well, I have to make a confession. I always buy the ducks hanging in the windows in the Chinese restaurants. They're so good. So don't hate me.
Too late. You're gonna have no air in your tires when you go outside. No,
So-
I love my ducks. I just they are so funny to me.
Yeah.
They are truly free-range ducks. They're
Oh, yeah.
out swimming. They're walking
yeah.
around.
Yeah, when they were little, Beth used to have to chase them around the cove in a kayak to get them to come in.
At like
just
10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is cool. So now I've heard good memory. Well, not necessarily good memories, but interesting memories about ducks.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is your most powerful oyster memory?
I would think it'd be when you and Dana were eating them, but they weren't big oyster eaters, and we got in
S&P.
one of the local restaurants here, and so we went and ordered our own oysters, and so we could pay for our
Bottle
own.
of champagne.
Yeah, and they were just struggling to eat them like.
I cut mine with a knife and fork,
Were they like
No.
gaggers? They're just regular oysters?
but we're not there. They don't sell us
We had a
anymore,
little
but
problem with the purchasing agent there. That,
Really?
yeah.
So
Well, they're missing out. They're
Yeah,
not
right?
selling your
Absolutely.
oysters.
Absolutely.
S&P, get on it, man,
Yeah,
before
get your-
they're not available.
But all the wait staff would constantly tell us, "Hey, those are the go-to oysters. They're a bag of 100. They'll sell 100 of them. Some brands get 80, 85. They
Right.
can actually sell."
Yeah.
But
Everywhere
it's
I
their loss.
delivered last week, they called me like 2 days later and were like, we're out. One restaurant doubled for this week. So that's pretty cool.
When you're selling to restaurants on a regular basis, what is typical in terms of the volume of oysters you're selling to any given place? Do they say we want 300 or do they say we want 5,000?
So our biggest restaurant here is Oyster Club.
What are they in the summer like?
1,600 a week, yeah.
That's a lot of oysters.
And they typically sell out before we bring them the following week.
And Oyster Club is here in Mystic?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
A
Our
place
chef,
called Oyster Club is my kind of
Mike,
place.
it's just so cool to send them places local where like I can drive by and say they're eating our oysters right now.
Yeah,
And then
super
we
cool.
took Chelsea to Boston for her 16th birthday. Dana and I took her, and it was like a girl long weekend, and we stayed right by Fenway, and all these like neat pubs around Fenway, they had our oysters.
Oh, that's
And so we introduced ourselves, and met managers and shook hands and had pictures taken.
It was a lot of fun watching other people eat our, enjoy them. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
what I
the
like
pay.
about the local market is you
Yeah.
get to go sit down and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like having people here, they want to know. I mean, they get the oysters from us direct all the time, but they want to go eat them in a restaurant too.
Sure. Do you do farm tours for people?
We need another boat.
Yeah. Which we're working on, but that's definitely on the
But the
menu.
demand
we
is-
still are doing some now,
Mm-hmm.
but really we need the other boat because one needs to be working 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's-
We're asking way too much of the one boat we have right now. Just a
Yeah.
21 Carolina skiff to do what we're doing.
That's the
Insane.
frustrating part. That's what kills me is we have everything else. Like we have everything that you can't buy. We have the location, we have the chemistry, we have the recipe, we have the drive, we have the passion, we have the people, we have the following, we have the relationships. We need money.
Yeah. Right.
And it's really fucking hard to find that. And I keep saying we're just going to keep pushing. Something is going to come of this. Like we need to get out there. We're so overdue for a break.
Right.
We've got to be patient and just like stick with it. And when we're paying for the truck out of pocket instead of the farm paying for it, just got to go for it. And all our eggs are in one basket, totally self-employed. Yeah. So, COVID affected building, oysters, and the rental. All 3 of our businesses were affected by COVID. So it was like total shutdown on all fronts. Thank God the state and the government offered us some relief. But we were just down and out. There was nothing going on. We had one job where the people weren't living in the condo that they had purchased. And we were completely redoing it. And that's what got us through, because we could be there at work and we could charge, our hours and just not be there at the same time. That's what kept us afloat,
Where do you hope you'll be in 5 years? Where do you see yourselves?
I would like to be just oystering.
Yeah.
And still working our asses off. It's still being filthy, dirty, exhausted, tired, but being able to take a Sunday afternoon off.
Right.
And not, because we'll go fishing now and it's like we spend the whole time talking about everything we should be doing. Right. So I would love to be just oystering and just feel a little more safe and comfortable. Yeah. Like a little less financially vulnerable would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see us selling $1 million a year, which enables
We're
us
sold
to have,
out consistently.
Yeah, which enables us to have full-time income for everybody. I'd like to mix in boat tours, and when I have some time off, I love being in the boat when we have time off. So, a lot of fishing.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for me too is having some time in the winter out of here.
Other than repairing gear and stuff like that during the winter, you're not doing much. You're not out on the water.
Well, at least a day a week we're harvesting. We sell all winter,
that's right.
But Jake likes it, so you know what? He can
you go.
it.
He's young.
Yeah.
Beat it.
They don't get cold.
No,
these
get some
kids.
layers on. Yeah, no, the pain level in the cold is brutal.
Yeah.
For him especially, I don't even know how he goes up and down the stairs.
It's so awesome that you have Jake here who loves it, who's good at it, who understands the business, knows that he can take this way into the future, and hopefully that will give you guys a little more freedom.
Yep.
Yeah. I'd like to do something with a couple nice houseboats off of here and rent those as well. Yeah. Because we have the docking facility and everything else to do that. But we'll see.
I just love people. I
shows.
do. I want to meet everybody. I want to talk to everybody.
Well, what I also love is not just that you want to meet people, but that you want to share this with people.
Can you not? I can't keep that to myself, know?
I have to say that this was definitely the most fun interview I've ever done. And
Dana's not here yet.
That's
so.
true.
Did you get enough out of the oystering part of it?
I know. It's like, wait, you guys
a lot
farm
of our
oysters?
story.
Oh, yeah, oysters. What's an oyster? I think that we did, because oyster farming to me, and the whole point of Oysterology, isn't just about oysters. Because if it was only about oysters, I'd have exactly one episode. It's about the people who do it, the passion, the culture, the place. It's all
the methods,
the backgrounds,
madness.
what leads you to this, all of this. And you guys are like the perfect, what would you call yourself, small to medium oyster farmers, or how do you rank?
I still think we're a small farm in comparison to most, but the one word that I would pick out of all the ones you have is the passion. When you have the passion for what you do, no matter what it is, and you put all of your effort into it, the product shows.
Yeah. A guy that was one of our competitors who was particularly unpleasant, and somebody came to the co-op and bought our oysters instead of theirs, and he looked at that person and he said, "Oyster's just an oyster." And I thought, but if that's your philosophy, you're in the wrong business.
Absolutely.
You better go get a job at a bank or something.
Yeah, that's right.
You shouldn't be farming.
That's right.
If you think that you can't make your product better than anybody else's, then just...
And we charge $10 more for the same number.
And we get it every time.
Yeah.
They ought to just go eat clam strips at Hojo's.
Yeah, they really should.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's their shellfish
lonely,
existence.
Lonely old men.
It's a soul-sucking
Sad
experience.
fucking bastards. Yep. Yep.
I might need a cocktail to recover from this.
We're not good at staying on topic.
Well, Kris and Beth, thank you so much. Can't wait to come back.
Appreciate your time. Look forward to another one.
New friendships.
Absolutely.
That's the best.
All right, guys. Thanks again.
You're
Take
welcome.
care.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this episode of Oysterology. Thanks to my guests, Kris and Beth Simonds. As always, show notes can be found on this episode's page, and if you enjoyed it, please rate or review us on whatever podcast platform you listen to. I'm your host, Kevin Cox. Join us next time when we pry open the shell of another interesting Oysterology topic. Something tells me this is going to be a very difficult interview.